Morning, everyone.
Good
Good morning, Rabbi.
We are learning Mishnah Shabbos, Parak Vav, Chapter 6, Mishna Ches, Mishnah 8. I'd like to dedicate this morning's learning. Memory of my mother, Mrs. Shalamis Rabinowitz, Shalamas Bas Yaakov Eliezer. Our learning should be a schus for her neshama. Okay. Hakiteya yoytze b'kav shalai. A kiteya means someone whose foot has been amputated. Okay. And he's basically got a false foot. Okay. Now, that means that, it's like his legs are still working. He just doesn't have a foot. And therefore he has this, whatever we call it, false shoe or false
artificial
foot.
limb.
Artificial limb. Well, it's not official. It's more like a shoe. It's more like just on his foot.
Okay.
It's more just like on his foot. And we say that on Shabbos he can go out with it. Well, it's like the person who has his foot amputated can go out with his false foot. Dear Rabbi Meir, there's Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yossi forbids. According to Rabbi Yossi, we say that he's not allowed to go out with the false foot. Now, what does exactly this false foot do? He doesn't support himself on it. He's still using crutches to get around, but it's covering up the fact that he's missing a foot. That's how this false foot works. That's how this one works.
Ornamental.
Yeah, it's basically a question of covering up. It's not that he is. So I'll explain to you. Okay, Rabbi Yossi holds that a false foot is not considered a shoe because the amputee does not use it for walking, only to disguise his defect. So that's how this one's working.
Mm-hmm.
So according to Rabbi Meir, it's still called an ornament because it's covering up that blemish. Nonetheless, Rabbi Yossi says no. Apparently, it's not as necessary as covering up as other things that we mentioned before, and he's not using it for walking, and therefore he can go out with it on Shabbos. Rabbi Meir says he could. It's like a shoe or an ornament. And Rabbi Yossi says he can't. Now, then the Mishnah says, if it has a receptacle for small pieces of either wood or material, then it's susceptible to tumah. So this shoe or this false foot, let's call it, right? It's made out of wood. For wood to be considered a kliya utensil, to be susceptible to tumah, it has to be a kliya utensil with a receptacle. That's the rule when it comes to wooden utensils. Metal utensils don't have to be that way, but a wooden utensil has to be that way. Now, this shoe, basically, you fit it onto whatever was left of his foot, right? They had to basically carve out something within the wooden shoe, let's call it, right over the wooden foot, and then stick his stump into it. Now, depending on how big or how little, how much room, so the thing is like this. If the wooden foot, if this false foot, his stump fits right into it, and there's nothing more that you use it to fill in, then it's not considered a wooden utensil with a receptacle, and therefore it's not susceptible to tumah. But if you also put in there little pieces of wood or little pieces of material, they're there in order to, probably to keep his foot, stabilized. But at the end of the day, it's a base kibble. It's a receptacle for materials. It's holding the materials. When there are no materials in there, there's only his foot there. The false foot is not holding his foot. The foot is, his body is actually carrying the false shoe. However, once you start sticking things into that area, into that receptacle of the false shoe, now it's holding other things, and therefore it's no more what we call pshute kliya. It's a wooden utensil without a receptacle. It's a wooden utensil with a receptacle, because the receptacle has to be a receptacle that's holding things and not where basically the other thing is holding it. So therefore, the Mishnah says that if it has a receptacle for small pieces, then we say tamei, it would be susceptible to tumah. Okay, that's the first case. The next case is like this: Smeichai shaloi, a person who's wearing supports. They're actually knee pads. Tamei and medras. They can be tamei as a medras. The Yitzim Shabbos. You can go out on them on Shabbos. And you can enter the courtyard of the Beis Hamikdash with them. Okay, so what are these smeichais? So the smeichais are, they translate as supports. What's going on here is that we're dealing with a person who has both feet amputated. Let me just make sure I'm getting this right. Yeah. He has both feet amputated and can move only by crawling on his knees. He wears leather knee pads on his knees and shins to protect them. Okay? So now, the first thing is Tamei and Medras. They're Tamei as a Medras. Medras, we've learned before, means that if a Zav supports himself on something that's considered supporting the weight of a Zav, a person who's Tamei as a Zav, he had certain kind of emission from his body that makes him a Zav. So, the Medras of a Zav, what a Zav supports himself on, becomes as Tamei as a Zav himself. Right? The Zav is the Avatuma, is the primary source of Tumah. Typically, what he touches would become a Rishon. It would only become a first level. But the halach, the Torah says, I am Medras, something that supports the Zav, and something that's made to support the Zav, or made to support anybody, but the Zav is using it, that becomes Tamei Medrash and becomes an Avatuma, becomes a primary source of Tumah, like the Zav himself. So these D-pads, a person clearly supports himself on them. And therefore, for this person to become a Zav, these knee pads would become Tamei as a Medrash. That's number one. Number two, the Yotzim Ben B'Shabbos. Basically, this is how he walks, right? The way he walks is he's walking on his knees and his shins. Now he has these knee pads to protect them. You know, it's clearly a garment. It's clearly there to protect him. And therefore, he can wear it outside on Shabbos. We're also not afraid that they're going to come flying off and he's going to go carrying them because either they're on tight enough or he's just not going to move without them. And then we say, V'nechnasim behen ba'azara. And you can enter the courtyard. Now, the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash, there is a halacha that you can't wear shoes in the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. So what are these called? What are these considered as knee pads? Are they shoes or not? The answer is they're not shoes. Shoes are worn at the end of your feet. He is wearing them on his knees. And therefore, we say they're not shoes, and he can go into the Azara wearing these things. Okay? Now, the last case is like this. Kisei usamachai shaloi. A chair and his supports, or we'll call them his supports. Now, what are these things? Here's the case. The case here is that we have a person who cannot use either of his legs. Both legs are paralyzed. So what does he do? He straps himself to a short, movable chair and uses crutches to push himself from one place to another. Excuse me just 1 second. Okay, sorry. So, we have this person. Both legs are paralyzed. He cannot use his legs at all. Okay. He straps himself to a short, movable chair and uses crutches to push himself from one place to another. On his feet or at the end of his stumps, he wears leather or wooden leg supports like shoes or false feet, which helps to prop up his legs as he pulls himself forward. Okay. Here's the picture.
Like a makeshift wheelchair almost.
Yeah. Now at the bottom, now these legs, right? These false shoes, whatever they call false legs, right, are at the bottom of his feet. Wherever the bottom of his feet are, that's where they are. Just that he can't use his legs at all. Okay. So now we say like this: Kisei usmoicha shaloi, the chair and the crutches. Tamei and Medras. They are Tamei as a Medras. That's pretty obvious, right? This is what he supports himself on. The ain yotzim ben b'Shabbos, but he may not wear the leg supports outside on Shabbos because they might fall off and be carried. Since the invalid's legs do not rest firmly on the ground, his leg supports can easily fall off, and he might carry them in the Rishus Harabim. Therefore, the Chachamim prohibited wearing leg supports on Shabbos. Okay. However, the invalid may use his mobile chair and crutches on Shabbos because they are like clothes. And there's no concern he might carry them because he cannot move about without them. So there's three things here. There's the chair, there's the crutches, and then the things on the bottom of his legs that actually, although he's paralyzed, he still some or another supports himself on them. Because when he moves, he's still in some level supporting himself on it, putting his weight on it. Putting his weight on it. So we say it like this. So it's Tamei Medras because he supports himself on it. Were it to be a zav, it would become tamei as a medrash, as what a zav supports himself on. You can't go with it on Shabbos because they may fall off and it may carry them. The chair and the crutches, right? It's almost like the person who can't walk without them on Shabbos. That's the same case. Then it's considered like clothing. It's something that he needs for himself. Then it says, "Ve'ein nechnasim behem ba'azara." You cannot wear those false feet into the azara. Why? Because they're shoes. He's wearing them at the end of his feet. And therefore, as shoes, he cannot wear them into the courtyard of the Beis HaMikdash. And the final case of the Mishnah is an katmin tahirin ve'in yotzin bahen. An katmin are masks. Just a mask for fun. It's not a mask to protect himself. It's just a mask. Bartanura says it's a mask to the wording is the Bartanura frighten little children. But it's a mask. So we say tahirin. Number one, not susceptible to tuma. You know why? Because it's not really doesn't have any real usage. That's number one. The Yitzimehen, you can't wear them on Shabbos outside in the street because they have no purpose. They're not a garment, and therefore they're just carrying. So that's the explanation. The explanation is that they're called masks. Actually, the Bartanura has another explanation that it wasn't a mask, but it was a donkey costume. The donkey costume that it says Leitzanim, clowns, jokesters used to wear on their shoulders. It was like they were carrying a donkey. So according to the not a garment, it's carrying, and therefore you cannot wear it out on Shabbos. Have a wonderful day.
So we should have
Thank you,
said
Rabbi.
that. Use this as a